Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 18 of Vinland Saga, and I'm pretty excited because we are officially in the final part of season 1. If you separate it out into 3 acts, which I'm an English teacher, so I like doing things in a 3-act structure. If you separate out 24 episodes into 8 episode chunks, the first 8 episodes are your intro, second 8 episodes are when things get crazy, and then the final 8 episodes are when things get really good. So we're kind of there, right? We're there. From episode 16 on, we've been getting into the final act, which seems fitting because now we have a duel between Thorkell and Thorfinn. I did not expect Thorfinn to come to Askeladd's rescue, but here we are. Why not? And so Canute and Bjorn and Willibald the priest, they're off on their own, and Thorfinn has gone back to save Askeladd, and he's got to fight Thorkell to do it. How Thorfinn is going to defeat Thorkell, I have no idea. Unless Askeladd gets involved, which Askeladd, he's a warrior, but is he truly honorable? Would he let it go down like that? I don't know. This whole episode has a big question mark, and I'm recording just shy of episodes 16 and 17 coming out on Patreon and YouTube. So I'm recording just a wee bit ahead, but I had to. I couldn't wait. I was like, I need to know what happens. But I do have a few comments before we start this episode that have come from the last couple episodes, mainly from episodes 15 and 16. So, Ridasante talking about how Thorkell, this part was really cool, that, Thorkell seems childish and innocent and kind of like goofy and is best waifu, according to the Discord on Patreon, but then he'll say chilling things like, I just want to be at war forever, and it's like, not so childish and innocent then it's like, no, Thorkell knows exactly what war entails, and he totally wants it to keep going. So it's like, oh, yeah, you seem all innocent, but then you want there to be never-ending death and destruction. Awesome. So there's that. But you can't help it because Thorkell just steals every scene that he's in. It's inevitable, right? I also love from several of you that Asgeir and Thorkell are a ship in the fandom. My BL heart is exploding. I'm like, yes, please, because I will unapologetically insert BL into every series because, damn it, if the mangaka's not going to give us romance, we got to go somewhere, right? And so there ain't a lot of lady Vikings in this series, so we got to take what we can get, right? So I thought that was really amusing. I liked that. JV Ever pointed out how Thorfinn was used to hunting for himself. So in episode 15, after Yule, Thorfinn's always kind of hunted for himself because none of the Vikings or Askeladd have ever helped him. They've always just like given him the scraps. So Thorfinn has had to be self-reliant and catch his own food to eat it. But the moment that he sits down at the dinner with Canute and Ragnar, it's sort of the first time that Thorfinn's ever in 11 years sat down and had like an actual meal with a family. Not since the 2 women back in episode 6 has he really had that opportunity. And so you can kind of see his guard like lower just a little bit, where he can kind of start seeing like the bond between Canute and Ragnar and hearing their stories. But then the moment that the messenger shows up, it's like back to Thorfinn being how he normally is. And it's like, So I thought that was really, really good to note that Thorfinn, like, he kind of gets reminded of that father-son bond between Ragnar and Canute, which, again, we kind of see that shades of that later on when Ragnar dies. But I thought that was really interesting to note. Thank you for doing that. Anita Meyer talked about how Ragnar, despite being Christian or having converted to Christianity, there's a really cool discussion in the comments for episode 15 between Ridasante and Anita Meyer, if you guys get a chance to go see it and read it. But there's a really cool commentary about Christianity and how Ragnar had embraced Christianity. You could argue he did that because Canute had, and he was just trying to appease, his son figure that he's helped to raise. But also, regardless of him converting or not, at the very end when he dies, he makes sure to grab his sword. And Anita Meyer commented that that's a very like Norse kind of pagan thing, where if you're going to go to Valhalla, you have to die with a weapon in your hand. And so it seems like it's symbolic that Ragnar reaches for the sword to make sure he has a hold of it. Now, you could argue it several different ways. It's not set in stone, but I like that the mangaka creates that imagery where you can question, because Ragnar kind of, to me, always felt like he was skirting the line between the Norse and Christian, like the Christian conversion and the Norse tradition. Like Ragnar always seemed like he was kind of this interesting blend of those two. Like he was still holding on he understood the traditions of the past, and you could tell he was still holding on to maybe a few of them, but he had converted over to Christianity. So it was this really kind of cool merging that was happening with his character. R.I.P. Ragnar. I do kind of miss you. Even though you could be such a pain, I do kind of miss him. So I thought that was interesting, Anita. Thank you for pointing that out. And then finally, Edgar noted that Askeladd, yeah, I agree. Askeladd had sudden backstory last episode. I was trying to prepare myself mentally for Askeladd to die, being like, okay, we're getting sudden backstory. Is he going to die? Surely not, because he's kind of been our protagonist this second core. But I was mentally preparing myself in the episode to be like, okay, is Thorkell gonna kill him? And Thorfinn's gonna like stumble across him dying at the end of the episode. That's where I thought it was going. And I like that Edgar pointed out that it would have been a very symbolic death because he was faced with the whole being surrounded by arrows, kind of like Thor's was, and Thorfinn coming across him as he was dying and being unable to stop him. It would have been a very poetic ending, but I don't think that's Askeladd's ending. Nah. Don't think that's going to happen. But I thought that was interesting. Edgar also noted, I'm going to show you guys a picture of it, that in the manga, apparently a lot of manga readers got mad in episode 16 because the image of Thorkell confronting Thorgrim, or I guess it'd be episode 17, the image of Thorkell confronting Thorgrim was very censored in the anime and didn't look like this at all. And you can kind of see the comparison here. Yeah, the manga looks a lot scarier and a lot more intimidating and crazy, right? Not what we get, not what we get in the anime. And apparently the director of episode 17 had to apologize because the image was not up to the standard that the manga readers wanted. That's pretty cool. I thought that was interesting. And then finally, if Bjorn is Mario, Edgar was like, does that make Canute Princess Peach? Yes. So the question is Thorkell Bowser, is Askeladd Bowser, and is Thorfinn Waluigi? Or is Thorfinn Luigi? I guess he's not Waluigi. He'd be Luigi. We don't know. But those were comments. Under 10 minutes. We're doing great. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for episode 18 and to see how this duel goes down. I don't know what to expect, y'all. I have a feeling we're going to cut back to Bjorn and Canute because we didn't resolve that. But I have a feeling it's going to go back and forth this episode, and I'm not ready for that. No, we're entering the final act. I'm like, I don't see how Thorkell can die. I really don't see how Thorfinn's going to kill Thorkell. Unless it's a draw, or unless Askeladd just grabs him and runs, and it's like, let's go, and Thorfinn's like just flailing behind him. I don't know, but Askeladd's pretty wounded, so I don't know how that's going to go down, but we're going to find out. So let's not waste any more time. We're going to start episode 18 of Vinland Saga, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. A toast to our King Canute. Oh my God. So yeah. Oh my gosh. So yeah, well, maybe old Askeladd saw something in Canute that no one else saw, and now it's all coming out. Man, this episode. Oh, I can only imagine if you were a manga reader. The whole time I was watching this episode, I was imagining reading the manga for these chapters and just seeing this all kind of play. Because the way that this episode was choreographed and orchestrated, you could just feel, as someone that reads manga, you could just see how the chapters would probably align themselves, and you could just see the things on the page like happening. And now I'm like, I really want to go read the manga for these chapters, but obviously I want to avoid spoilers, so I'm gonna have to wait till I'm done. But I can just imagine like being a manga reader for this chapter on Canute, and for him to finally awaken and wake up. And if you've told me, I've been wondering what Willibald's purpose was going to be throughout this entire season. And if you told me at the start of this that Willibald was going to be the one to lead Canute into this spiritual enlightenment, or lack thereof, or opposite of, and just kind of like, I guess it is, we'll talk about it, it's very complicated. But if you told me that Willibald was going to be the catalyst to him having this awakening, I'd have been like, really? But no, he really is. Willibald, of all people, that's been sitting here drinking this entire series, has been the one that kind of snowballs so to speak, Canute's catalyst and his waking up and realizing, okay, fine, screw it. Kind of, and we'll talk about the whole thing with Anne from back in episode 14, the whole thing with Askeladd and what he thinks, like all of it. Like I feel like Askeladd at this point, Askeladd does not know. I think Askeladd still thinks he can manipulate Canute. I don't know now. It's funny. We're going to talk about Canute. We're going to talk a little bit about Attack on Titan, mainly about Canute's voice actor and the character that he plays in Attack on Titan, because there's some parallels there that are kind of fun with his voice actor and the character that he plays. But we'll get into that. But there's a lot going on in this episode, and there's a lot being talked about in terms of like the meaning of life, what it means to be a true warrior, all of that stuff. And it's all coming to play, and everything that Thorfinn has been ignoring this entire series, Canute has been kind of ignoring, or not ignoring, but running away from, and not being able to find the answers. In this episode, Canute kind of finds those answers, and Thorfinn is still struggling. If Thorfinn is still breathing, God, that whole thing with Thorkell just launching him into space, like blasted off like Team Rocket. The moment that Thorfinn went in the air that high, I was like, oh, when he comes down, he's gonna break bones. That's not good. That whole theory about Askeladd running away with him, that may happen, because Askeladd may be like, yoink, let's go. But I don't know, Canute's now like, let's go find Thorkell and talk to him. So what's gonna happen now? All bets are off. All bets are off. The moment Canute was like, well, I'm gonna go talk to Thorkell, I'm like, well, all bets are off as far as this goes. I don't know. And Canute has not laid a finger on anybody yet. So he hasn't done a bit, because Canute's not a swordsman. So I'm like, but he has this power, right? He stops Bjorn in his tracks. And Willibald thinks he's witnessed a miracle, but I'm like, no, it's funny. It's funny. We'll talk about all this. There's so much to break down in this episode, but this episode is great. It's one of my favorites. I like this episode quite a lot, but there's so much happening, and I feel like the OP comes in late. The midway point came in at like 18 minutes in. I was like, when the screen went black, I was like, is this the end of the episode? But no, it was only like, it was at the halfway point, but we were like 3/4 of the way episode in. So there's so much happening. I had to bring Whiteboard Coon out because it's just a lot. And I swear that 3/4 of the shot from the OP is in this episode. Like 3/4 of the OP shots are in this episode. So I'm like, there's really not much left other than Thorfinn going towards that village, wherever that leads us. What is happening? You know, I wouldn't be surprised at this point. If Askeladd and Canute run off and end up separated from Thorfinn. As much as I want Thorfinn and Canute to stay a couple in this, I would not be surprised if Canute and Askeladd run off and Thorfinn gets separated from the group. I wouldn't be surprised if this season ends with Thorfinn separated from them, because if somehow they lure Thorkell away, I don't know. I don't want to be spoiled, and I don't know where it's headed as far as that goes, but I wouldn't be surprised, because Askeladd still has his goal. So Askeladd, we're going to put Askeladd up here and just kind of put him out to the side, because really Askeladd is not the focus of this episode. It's Canute. But Askeladd, as far as we know, he thinks that Thorfinn is going to die. And he still wants to run to Gainsborough with Canute. That is still his game plan. Now, whether anybody else is involved in that game plan, we don't know, but that's still his plan. He thinks Thorfinn's gonna die. He's like, that kid, that Baka came back. He's dead. I gotta get out of here. And he has, as we know in this episode, he's pulled the arrows out. So he's pulled the arrows out. Now, if he stopped the bleeding, I don't know, because I would think that you'd be bleeding a lot in that case. But we'll see. Thorkell, actually, I'm amazed that Thorfinn got some pretty good hits on our boy Thorkell. He got some good slashes in there. And I like that Thorfinn is smart enough to realize the chainmail. And so Thorfinn's like, I'm fine. Thorfinn's like, I got this. He's like, I can do this. So we're going to put Thorfinn over here. Okay. Thorfinn is holding his own against Thorkell, or he was. But man, his Achilles heel is his dad. His dad is his Achilles heel. Whenever it starts talking about that whole true warrior thing and his father's teachings, He just, that is Thorfinn's Achilles heel, and Askeladd knew it. Now Thorkell doesn't really care about it. He just wants to bring it up because he wants to talk to him about it. But he also wants to fight him. So it's kind of, again, like I said in a few episodes ago, I get a very Goku vibe from Thorkell. He just wants to fight people. It doesn't matter what weapon he uses. Okay. And so, yeah, and Thorfinn's advantage is that he is small. He is very agile. He's very quick and nimble. Thorkell, his power is his strength, but he's not as fast. And so he's easier to get hits off of. You just don't want to get hit back, because if you get hit back, you're dead. But if you don't get hit, you could stand a chance of fighting him. And all these guys are just standing around watching this battle, right? They're just watching this fight. And honestly, Thorfinn is only fighting him to get Askeladd out of there. That's really his only purpose. And he's just, I love his, Thorfinn looks really young when he like has that little pose. He's like, he has his like little angry badger face, and he looks very young there. He definitely looks his youth. And then I didn't even think about the chainmail. Didn't even think about the chainmail. Didn't think about it at all. I want to make note that Thorkell looks like the biggest child when he's just sitting there like tending to his chainmail. I liked these. Like, God. It's ridiculous. So yeah, he's like, are you not afraid of my axe? No, I think Thorfinn's doing pretty good handling it. You've got a lot of guts. You're like Thor's. Mm-hmm. And that's what, that is Thorfinn's weakness. He's like, excuse me? Thorkell, I think half of why Thorkell is interested in Thorfinn is because he's Thor's child. That's one big reason why he is invested. So Thorkell, he knows and wants to tell Thorfinn about Thor. So he wants to share all the old war stories with Thorfinn about his old man. But because he's a warrior, he's like, no, we got to fight first. And then if you beat me, maybe I'll talk to you more. And he's like, who are you to my father? And Thorkell's like, oh, he didn't tell you about me? That's really cold of him. I don't blame Thor's for not telling him about Thorkell, because Thor's, if he's going like on a path towards peace, why would you want to tell your son about this giant of man who just slaughters people? If your goal is to spread this idea of peace and tranquility, Thorkell is not exactly someone you probably want to bring up. So it's pretty obvious why he didn't mention him. Yeah. And he's like, I heard he's descended from a Jarl. He was of noble origin. He's like, Helga's the one from the family of Jarls. He's like, no, your mom's the one from the Jarls. He's like, your dad rose up through the ranks because of his skill with a sword. And Thorfinn's like, excuse me? It's like, that's the thing. I think Thorfinn was so young whenever Askeladd and them fought him that I don't know if it really clicked to Thorfinn that his dad was really, really powerful and really strong. I think that he knows his dad was strong, but I don't think he quite realizes just how famous Thor's was. I don't think, because Askeladd was not in the proper circle geographically to know about Thor's like Floki and the others were, and like Thorkell was. So Askeladd, and it all makes sense now because Askeladd's part Welsh, he was kind of removed from the Danes. He didn't care about the inner circle of the Danes, did not care. He hated all of them. So to him, Thor's was not somebody on his radar, but to Thorkell and Floki and the others, Thor's was kind of legendary. And Thorfinn, I think, because he's been so removed from everything, he doesn't quite realize that. And so he knows of this idealistic version of his father that his father tried to project to him as a child, but doesn't know like the other side that Thor's has told, Ylva and Helga and all of them, right? He says, oh, do you want to know more? And he says, well, if you do, he's like, you're going to have to entertain me some more. He's like, yeah, if you want me to talk, we're going to have to battle some more and have some more fun. And then maybe I'll talk some more if I feel like it. And Thorfinn just gets riled up. And he's like, no. Thorfinn's like, I love it. He's like, I can entertain you, but it's going to be hard holding back enough to make sure you can talk. Oh, Thorfinn, you try to be so badass. I love that Thorfinn tries to be badass in that moment. And everybody's like, you're threatening Thorkell? What? And they all laugh at him. They all laugh at him because they're like, you're challenging Thorkell and being so smart alecky around him? That's not going to work. And then the one guy that calls him an idiot, he says, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. and just gets the axe. Like, not even the axe, the handle of the axe went down so hard it crushed his skull. Oh my god. And Thorkell's like, no, 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 we do not do that here. That face where he's like, was that funny? Oh my god. I consider Thorfinn to be a true warrior. Oh, that face. He's like, no, this is the thing about Thorkell. He almost has like a split personality where he can be jovial. He can be jovial and sprightly in battle, but he is easily offended. He is easily offended and takes it seriously. Yeah, it's all fun and games until you say something like make him riled up, and he's like, no, not having it at all. So yeah, God, that was intense. So yeah, they're like, and he shuts everybody up. He's like, don't you laugh at him. Like, he's proving himself against me. Like, he's more of a challenge than any of you, so shut up. He's like, Thor's was stronger than me. So prove to me that you really are his child. So, and that's, again, a little bit of an unreasonable standard for Thorfinn. He's like, your dad was stronger than me, so you must be too. And Thorfinn's like, ah. He's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then goes after him. And that's the OP. Wow, that OP was like 3 minutes into it. It was a pretty long intro. All right, and so then we have these two duking it out. The animation was really good, like with the axes and everything, just so quick. Like the movement this episode was really, really nice. And meanwhile, Askeladd's like tearing the arrow out of him and trying to like get to where he can move. He's like, that stupid kid came back here to die. And he's like, what happened to the prince? So yeah, Askeladd's like, okay, Thorfinn's got a death wish. Where's Canute? Where is our boy Canute? And God, this episode, it's so good. So out of the cradle, this episode is so good. And for the record, the shot of Canute with the beautiful curls and his hair, Canute is like Sleeping Beauty. He's like Sleeping Beauty, like about to wake up. So let's talk about Canute. We'll put Canute over here. Canute gets like a whole section to himself this episode. And I'm going to put Ragnar right here. Ragnar gets this little spot. He gets a little halo beside him because he's dead. He does like a little spiritual farewell to Canute, does that. And I'm going to put Willibald over here. Oh, Willibald, who's somehow, how they still have liquor, I don't know, because he seems like he's been chugging it nonstop this whole time. Somehow still finds the means to get drunk. I don't even know. But I love this shot of Canute, like just all with the beautiful hair and everything. Mm-hmm. You can hear the sound of the battle nearby. And stop it already. And God, Bjorn! Bjorn is just, I am a little worried about Bjorn because he does have the stomach wound, as Canute pointed out. He's got the stomach wound. He has like a cleaver like stuck in his shoulder and another spear in his back. Bjorn's not in a great place. I'm a little worried that Bjorn's going to bleed out and die. I'm a little worried about Bjorn. Just a wee bit. That stomach wound makes me nervous. Don't you have anything better to do? I love these just like trying not to think about it. Like, I don't want to think about it. Be quiet. I don't want to open my eyes. I want to stay asleep forever. Yeah, and I love this, like, him dreaming in the snow. I was waiting for, like, a body to just, like, fling towards him and land in the snow beside him, but it doesn't happen. Instead, he has this dream about Ragnar and seeing, like, Ragnar, like, spiritually, like, saying goodbye to him, right? Uh-huh. And the thing of it is, and Ragnar, the way he sees him is basically dead. So he looks so old and grizzled there, right? He looks so old and grizzled. Old conehead. Mm-hmm. And he says, you're still alive. And then he realizes it's a dream. The way that Canute is drawn this episode is gorgeous. The way they draw Canute is, even when he's like got the most disturbing expressions, he's beautiful. Like, I'm like, all the animation budget went to Canute this episode, but just like his expressions and everything. And he realizes that Ragnar is dead. And this is a dream, isn't it? So the thing about it is that in his dream, again, this is a dream, so it's not reality. And it's not something supernatural. This show isn't supernatural, so it's not really Ragnar. It is Canute's, he dreams of Ragnar's goodbye. And you could say that that is in some way a means to cope and grieve, because he didn't get a chance to say goodbye. He kind of had to run off at the last minute. So you could say this is a chance for him to cope and like process and accept Ragnar's death, being like, okay, I get to say one last goodbye to you, even if it's a dream. This is my coping mechanism. This is my way to grieve and move on. And I can't do that until I say a proper goodbye to you, right? Since we didn't have like a funeral or anything. And so what's interesting to note with all of this is I love the background. I love the stark white trees against everything. Everything's covered in snow and it's all like blanketed in white. The thing that's interesting about this is all in Canute's head. So this is how he views Ragnar. These are his thoughts of Ragnar. Ragnar is not actually there speaking to him. This is Canute's thoughts of Ragnar and how he interprets him. He says, "Are you going? You'll leave me behind." And he says, "Are you telling me to live alone in a world like this?" So Ragnar, Canute is afraid that he is going to have to live in this world alone. He believes that nobody else is on his side. Everybody's trying to use him, and nobody had a genuine connection with him like Ragnar did. But Willibald's whole deal is fascinating when we get to it. But he's saying, do you think I can survive by myself? And then Ragnar, the reaction that Ragnar has is very, very in character, right? It's how Canute would expect him to react. And so how Canute views Ragnar, so his views, this is, again, his views of Ragnar. The idea that he was supposed to be his educator. He was supposed to teach Canute the ways, the ways to be a jarl, aka a noble. So Ragnar's entire responsibility was to teach Canute how to be a proper noble person and to take the reins of king. And he failed at that. He said, I failed as the person tasked with your education. And we see like them fishing in the pond to get the fish that he'd make the dish out of. And he says, I was supposed to raise you as a jarl, but I raised you as a normal child. And I'm assuming maybe that one woman's his wife, or she just works in the kitchen. But he shows him how to make, like a farmer would raise his own child. So Ragnar was a farmer. A farmer who became Canute's mentor. The thing of it is that was Ragnar a slave himself? Was Ragnar a farmer that the king, that was smart and could handle a sword, and so the king enslaved Ragnar and was like, here, I'm going to put you in charge. You know how to use a sword, you know how to cook, you know how to take care of yourself and my kid. I'm going to leave Canute with you because you seem like you know how to handle things and my kid may not starve while he's with you. We don't know, right? But he was a farmer who helped Canute. And I like that. One thing about this show I really like is proportions. This show does not make anybody it's not like the skinny shonen protagonist that has like tiny arms and then swings a sword and like crumbles a mountain. No, these guys are beefy and they have like appropriate musculature. And so even little baby Canute, like little child Canute, has like thick arms and like a torso. Like he's got some meat on his bones, right? He's not this scrawny child, right? Because he's the king's son. He would be fed well, right? And so he's like, even though I knew that's not what the king wanted, forgive me. So in Canute's eyes, he knows that Ragnar went against the king. He went against the king's orders. And in Canute's mind, Ragnar felt guilty. felt guilty. Which he's kind of expressed that over the last several episodes, so it would not surprise me why Canute would think that. But he asked for Canute's forgiveness in the dream. And God, Canute's face, he's so sad. Like, just his sad expression where he's like about to cry. It's like, it's from the OP. He's like, what's wrong with that? You understood my feelings better than my father, the king. So in Canute's eyes, Ragnar understood him better than his father. He's like, my father didn't understand how I felt about things, but you did. Like, God, it's just this all this is so good. I love these expressions, like him lamenting. It's just so beautiful. And he's about to cry in the dream, and he just is literally on the verge of tears, and then he sheds them. I never want to be born into the royal family. He says, Canute goes, if I had been your son, it would have been better. If I had been born as your son. Then everything would have been better. So Canute wishing he'd been born Ragnar's son instead. So he didn't have those pressures of everything that was dealt him. And lamenting all of that. And he goes to Ragnar and he gives him a hug like it's their final farewell. And then Ragnar says that he's happy. He's happy that he says that. And Canute asks him not to go and tells him that he loves him. And Ragnar's like, nah, that's not how this dream works. I'm already dead. But I do love like the tears being shed. Like it's so sweet, that scene between the two of them. And he stands up to go. And I love that the imagery of he's got the blood going down, like from where he was stabbed. It's like the ghost of Christmas past. There are some things you realize once you've experienced a loss. So the realization after a loss. Jumping out of the nest. Yep, he's like, you've lost, your innocence is lost, but he's like, you've already noticed. He's like, it's too late. He's like, that innocence, I've kicked you out of the nest, you've already figured it out, that you're going to have to fly. And God, poor Canute. And he's like, Ragnar, wait, no. And he's like, I'm just a dream. He says, it's time for you to wake. So then Canute has his awakening. His enlightenment, however you want to phrase it. But Ragnar's like, it's time for you to wake up. Like, I loved you. You loved me. That's great. But now I'm gone. And so you got to find a way to deal with it. And he's like, and he asks him to come back. And that close up of him where he has the tears streaming down his face. And he's like asking him to come back. It's so well animated. It's so good. And then I love that he's like on the blanket and on either side of the white trees, right? He says, I wish you well, your highness. And then he wakes up. Saying Ragnar. God, from here on in at this point, like we're not even to the halfway point of the episode, but the episode's so good from here on in. And this conversation where he wakes up and like wipes the tears from his eyes. And then there's this battle going on. So Bjorn is just on shrooms, kicking people's asses, is gone insane and he's just violently flailing everywhere. And Canute's like, oh my God. And it's just, animation is insane. And they all try to attack together and Bjorn just takes them all out. Like just smashes their heads in. Oh my God. And I love that we get like the blood like gets on Canute and it gets on his face. The blood does. And then he like wipes it off. I feel like that's like Canute getting splattered with the blood. So having like the blood splatter on his face. It's almost like a christening. Almost like, you know, if you christen a ship, you smash the bottle of wine over it. It almost feels like he's been like baptized by blood sort of situation. And then he wipes it off and smears it. And so then Willibald asks, hey, you okay? You hurt? Willibald's like, I've just been sitting over here on this barrel watching this whole thing go down. I didn't see the need to get involved. He's like, those men are fighting over you. So Willibald brings up the concept that the men are fighting over Canute. He's like, these guys are all battling because of you. They're waiting to see. He's like, shouldn't you take charge and do something? The winner is going to take you. And Bjorn, and I love that he's like, your priest, aren't you going to stop them from fighting? Which is such a funny phrase. That's such a funny phrase when Canute's like, you're a priest, aren't you going to stop them from fighting? And I'm like, well, no, because the priest is probably against fighting. So no, he's not going to step in. No. And I liked Willibald's answer, where Willibald was like, no, is there a way to stop them? It's better to let those who wish to die, die. Yeah, Willibald's like, are you joking? I have no stake in this fight. He's like, those who die, those, again, who live by the sword, die by the sword. Willibald's like, I am not going to step in and endanger my own life for no reason. He's like, they chose this violence. They're going to enact it out. They chose to live this way. They're going to choose to die this way. And I actually absolutely love Canute's expression when he says that. Like, Canute's expression, like, when it, like, that smile on his face, it's like kind of it's sort of like a sad smile. He's just like, you're right. He's just like, yeah, no, it's like, how can he argue with that logic, right? He's just like, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah. And just the two of them sitting there in the snow watching Bjorn just flip this guy and rip them apart. It's almost humorous. But he tells Willibald that he had a dream as all this is going on, a dream about Ragnar. And he said goodbye. He was a faithful man even in death. Yeah, almost like he made sure to tell Canute goodbye even though he died. In this world, there's no one who loves me anymore. And that's when Willibald's like, Ragnar didn't love you. I love that Willibald, he's like, you found enlightenment, but you're wrong. I love that. He's like, you figured some things out, but you're not quite right, Your Highness. No. It's not that there's no one that loves you anymore. That's not it. He's like, was the emotion that Ragnar felt towards you love? And that's when, and I love the symbol of the cross in the snow. The cross in the snow, I love it. Like that imagery is so good. He says, in order to keep you safe, he watched 62 innocent villagers be killed. We're going to bring that up because Willibald was not happy about that. He points out that Ragnar, through his quote-unquote love of Canute, was responsible for 62 people dying. And he's going to say it later, but what Willibald says is that it's love versus discrimination. I love this. Where he's like, no, what Ragnar did back there wasn't love. It was discrimination. He chose you over those people. Is that love? Because love is supposed to be like kind. And love is supposed to be, love is supposed to represent this purity to it, right? There's a purity to love is what Willibald is getting at. Is that love is pure. It is pure and it is encompassing. It is pure and encompassing, and it applies to everything. Everything equally is what love is. And he's saying that no, what Canute had for you was something that was a true feeling, and it was passionate, and it was honest, but it was not equal, and it was not pure, and it was not encompassing everyone. It was biased. He chose Canute over those people. And Willibald's like, that's not love. That is him choosing you over them, and that's discrimination. It doesn't have to be, you know, a holistically evil thing, but it did result in those 62 people losing their lives. That's not love, right? And so Canute just kind of stares at him, and he says, Your Highness, love, what is it? Like, where is it? And so, and I love that we see, as this conversation is going on, we cut to the Vikings, and they are stripping the clothes, they're stripping the trinkets, they're slipping the boots, they're slipping everything from the corpses that they just killed. He says, you know, these guys weren't that good. As there's just this like bloody battlefield, it's not easy to find strong opponents. And they're just like putting new clothes and everything on and stripping them of their possessions. And just saying he should have killed him instantly. And like seeing like everyone is gathering around the battle and they all want to go watch it. To see it. And everybody's just going crazy watching Thorfinn versus Thorkell. So I'm wondering if Askeladd's gonna like sneak out. I guess he doesn't because he's still there. But Thorfinn has managed to get some hits on Thorkell. Like his knife is bloody, right? And there's like cuts and everything and rips all over Thorkell's armor. Thorkell's chainmail only goes around his torso. It does not cover his giant beefy man arms. And he's still smiling, but his coat and everything is starting to get cut up. And they're like, he's getting beat up by that kid. And then he's like, nice, Thorfinn. And he just like does the dramatic thing from the OP where he sheds the furs. I don't even have 5 men who'd be a match for you. Yeah, he just is talking about how Thorfinn would be stronger than any of his men. I love it. Meanwhile, Thorfinn's like, okay, aim for his tendons in his arms and legs. He's like, if I go after his vitals like I did in London, I'm going to pay the price. So meanwhile, Thorfinn is trying to strategize. He is trying to strategize a way to mortally wound Thorkell. Thorkell doesn't seem too concerned. He's like, I'm fine. 'Tis a flesh wound. Gonna walk it off. God, them beefy arms. Like, nope. Just so beefy. God, yeah, seeing him stand side by side, he's like, I know you're strong, but your swordsmanship is average. He's like, only average. He's like, you need training. Thorkell, and I feel like Thorkell I kept thinking Thorkell was going to offer to train Thorfinn. He was like, come with me and I'll train you to be a proper warrior. He notes that Thorfinn is strong, but he's a diamond in the rough. He's not polished. He's like, you have a lot of potential, but you're wasting it. And yeah, that all checks out because Thorfinn has been self-taught for the last 11 years. Askeladd and Bjorn have done nothing to train him. They've just idly let him follow them because they know that he's a good little dog and he'll do what they tell him to. But he's like, there's something missing before you achieve perfection as a warrior. And Thorfinn's like, what? He's like, in that case, why are you having a hard time? And he's like, good point. I like that Thorkell takes that so seriously. Like, Thorfinn's trying to make a joke. Thorfinn's like, well, then why are you struggling if I'm missing something? And Thorkell's like, yeah, no, I am too. I just like Thorkell takes it so seriously. He's like, I'm missing something as well. I thought I could learn it from you because you're Thor's child. And this line here, as it's starting to snow, like you can see the little drifts of snow coming in. And I like that Thorfinn's like, excuse me. Like that picture where he has his lips pursed, it reminds you Thorfinn is still, even though he's 17, he's very much a child. And he says, Thorfinn, and he's very serious. Like Thorkell is as serious as can be. He says, what do you think? what? And he like watching them, like all these guys like like just cheering them on and everything. He says, what does it mean to be a true warrior? And that gets Thorfinn's attention because he's like, excuse me? So this concept of a true warrior. Well, his dad talked about a true warrior. His dad said a true warrior does not need a sword. A true warrior doesn't need a sword. And we're going to relate that up here to Canute here in a second, right? Because Canute doesn't use a sword at all this episode. And I was waiting for him to, but then I was like, no, Canute has not had any training with swords, so why would he be good at it? No, but a true warrior does not need a sword. And I think that's what Thorkell is getting at. Which is funny that Thorkell says that, because I feel like Thor's philosophy about not needing a sword, maybe that's why Thorkell uses axes. Oh my god, maybe Thor's tried to tell Thorkell back in the day the same line he told Thorfinn, where he's like, a true warrior doesn't need a sword. And Thorkell's so dense that he took it literal and was like, oh, and just like tossed his sword away and be like, then I'll just use axes. And Thor's is like rubbing his temples like, that's not what I meant. But that gets Thorfinn's attention, and he thinks of his father. And if anything is Thorfinn's weakness, it is his father. And it just cuts straight to Canute, and there's so much meaning behind that Thorfinn has been ignoring his father's words. That's the thing. Thorfinn has been this entire series ignoring his father. His father told him not to live by the sword, to only use it when you need to defend yourself, that a true warrior doesn't need a sword, that he doesn't need to be this battle-hungry like monster. And Thorfinn has been ignoring him the entire series in search of revenge instead. In search of revenge. He's ignored him for that. And now those words are coming back. And we immediately go to Canute, who's going to talk about fathers here and about the whole thing with the true warrior. He's like, are you asking what love is? And he says, are you saying that Ragnar didn't love me? And Willibald's like, yes. I'm glad Willibald's honest. He's like, then let me ask you. Canute's like, well, if it wasn't love, then what was it? Like, what was it that he gave me? Then who can embody love correctly? So that question, I'm going to put over here. Who can embody love correctly? If it wasn't Ragnar, if Ragnar wasn't doing it right, then who can, right? And he said, he's right there. And he's like, see? And he motions to the man that's dead in the snow. When he died, he became more beautiful than anyone among the living. And so the answer is those who are dead. And there is the Christian implication of that, because there's the implication that Jesus died, and in death he became, the idea is that Jesus became beautiful in death, that he became this embodiment of love only because he died. And because of that, then he became this eternal being. Like, there's that concept in Christianity. And so he says when he died, he became more beautiful than anything among the living. He is love itself. And there's a tie to Jesus in that, right? That there's a tie to Jesus becoming this love embodied. There's that tie to Christianity in that concept. Absolutely. That Willibald is a part of. And Canute's sitting there watching, and he says he'll never hate others or steal anymore. So the concept that those who are dead, they cannot hate or steal. They don't suffer. So he says that they cannot hate others or steal anymore. And then he was abandoned there. And so that kind of relates again to Jesus being like crucified and being abandoned by his people. And God, the imagery of like the bodies just decaying and then being taken back by the earth, is there something so raw about that that's so good, like the wolf and its cub eating on it? he says he was abandoned, and he's going to give his body with generosity to the beasts and insects. So there is a generosity. There's a generosity. There's no more materialism. It's giving back without question. And then lies exposed to the wind and the rain without a single word of complaint. So no complaints. No complaints. And then God seeing like the butterflies and everything with the bones and the furs, says death perfects a person. The concept that death perfects a person. And we see that with Thor's, and we see that with Ragnar. So, in the idea that it's so true, and it fits that we get the image of Thorfinn in the shadows with Thor's behind him. Because, up until Thor's death, Thorfinn took a lot of things for granted with his father. He loved his father, sure, but he took a lot of his teachings for granted and just kind of like in one ear and out the other them, or tried to contradict them. But then once Thor's died, it was like Thor's became a legend. He became this perfect person in Thorfinn's eyes, and Thorfinn saw his teachings from a whole different perspective. And the love that Thor's tried to grant him in those final moments became clear to him. So Thor's in death became perfected. And the idea of Christianity is that Jesus became perfected through death. He became the embodiment of dying for someone's sins through his death. There's that. Ragnar, the whole goodbye that he just gave Canute, Ragnar's whole image. Ragnar has been such kind of like a flawed individual, but in this final moment in Canute, his death kind of perfected him for Canute. Canute realized everything he needed to realize about Ragnar the moment that he died. Like it all came full circle. So there's a lot of meaning to that, right? So there's that. And then we cut back to Thorfinn. So it's perfect. Like the Canute and Thorfinn parallels of how the concept of a true warrior, what that means, and the concept of love and death. I feel like Canute and Thorfinn are kind of like writing these parallel lines with these concepts, but they're coming at them from very different perspectives. And it seems like they're arriving at different resolutions about them, right? Thorfinn kind of falls. He doesn't quite make the mark, but Canute kind of rises up. So it's interesting how that's portrayed. And Thorfinn seems to reflect in that moment. And Askeladd's watching him. Like as Thorfinn is, and there's a sword to Askeladd, damn it. But as Thorfinn is reflecting, Askeladd's sitting there like, come on. And they're like, do it. And I like that reflecting face of Thorfinn. Like he's like that true warrior, huh? And then he realizes, he's like, damn it. He realizes where he's at. And he's like, oh, you don't know? He's like, don't worry about it. I wasn't expecting you to know anyway. But the thing of it is, I think Thorfinn does know. I think Thorfinn knows, but he doesn't quite know how to articulate it. And I think Thorfinn's afraid if he does articulate it, then it's going to make everything he's done so far a lie. And reveal how pointless everything he's been doing has been. So I think Thorfinn does know the answer to Thorkell's question, but if he answers Thorkell's question, then it's going to show how much of a fool Thorfinn is. Because Thorfinn is a fool. He's been fighting this battle for revenge for no reason. This whole situation that Thorfinn is in is of Thorfinn's own design. Thorfinn doesn't have to be there. He didn't have to be there at all. No, he could have joined Leif and gone back home years ago. But he chose to stick around for revenge. And so in this moment, Thorfinn is too proud to admit that, everything I've been doing is kind of for a selfish and stupid reason, and I'm a fool. And I can't tell you that because it will just, then he can't face it. He can't face that reality. So he chooses not to answer. And Thorkell doesn't know. Thorkell doesn't know what Thorfinn's thinking. So he's like, oh, you just don't know? That's okay. I don't expect you to know. And then he gets mad. He's like, that was dirty. Because, oh man. He's like, that was dirty. He like goes through such a myriad of expressions in this. And Thorkell's like, Thorkell isn't exactly playing mind games like Askeladd. Thorfinn's used to Askeladd's mind games. Thorkell's not really about that life. He's just like, I was just seeing if you knew, but you don't. But Thorfinn connects it as playing dirty, but that's not it. And then we go back to Willibald and them. And Canute's like, are you saying that death is the essence of love? So this concept that death is the essence of love. Because yeah, that's kind of the morbid thing, is that if you've ever lost someone, or if you've ever had a family member that's died, that especially someone that like maybe knows that they're going to die or has like a terminal illness or something, usually in their final days, all of the superfluous, all of like the materialistic, all that, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like everything that's beautiful in the world, and whether you're spiritual or not, whether you're religious or not, everything else kind of falls away. And it's literally just about the people you care about and yourself and your faith, if you have that. And so, yeah, it really is, it's in the most morbid of ways. Yeah, it does perfect a person, and it is kind of the essence of it. That's the crazy thing. And this whole conversation kind of reveals that. And he said, and Willibald says, yes. He's like, then what is the feeling when parents care for their children, and when a husband and wife care for each other, and when Ragnar cares about me? And that's the conversation about discrimination. And Willibald's face is so stoic there. He's like, it's no different from fawning over a king while hitting a slave with a whip. Like, yeah, like that's it. He's like, oh, you fawn over a king, but you hit a slave. It's like, that's not love. That's discrimination. It's like, it can be true. It can be passionate. You can honestly feel that. It doesn't have to be a lie. But is it love? When you punish someone else to show favoritism towards another person? That's brutal. And he's like, to Ragnar, you are more important than anyone else, Your Highness. And I do like seeing like Ragnar when he was younger. He wasn't quite the conehead he is now. And then probably even more important than his own life. This is very true. Yeah, Ragnar cared more about Canute than his own life. Sure. And he says his tender feelings towards you were discrimination. And then says, and Canute's just sitting there awestruck, like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's like, and so I love, he's like, I see. And then you see the two, he's like, I'm beginning to understand. You see the two birds that are like picking at each other and like cleaning each other, showing discrimination towards one another against everything else. He's like, I'm beginning to understand. I feel like the fog has lifted. Yeah, like everything's starting to piece together. Like, okay. Meanwhile, Thorkell and Thorfinn are still going at it, and just like, God, the animation's so good. He's done with you. Oh, but I like that Thorfinn like held the knife up to cut his foot as he went to kick him. That was really good. And yeah, that would hurt. And he manages to get a couple slices in on his arm. Yeah. Ooh, he's just going to pick at him. Yep. And Thorkell's clearly getting aggravated, and he's like, it's still too shallow. And I love the imagery of Thorkell kicking up the snow at the same time that Canute picks up the snow. Mwah! Chef's kiss. It's so good. And then he picks up the snow and holds it in his hand. I love him holding it in his hand. Picking a thumbnail is going to be hard, but it's probably going to be Canute. He says, I'm beginning to understand this snow. I do love that this show shows that when you pick up something cold, it like starts to like do the pink around your hands from where it's getting like frostbite. I do like that effect. This snow is love. Right? And Willibald's like, yes, it is. That's right. The sky is love. All of nature. It's literally nature, right? Nature is love. It's literally what is around you. The wind, everything, the fog. It's like the mountains. All of this represents love. I love him. But then, and I love Willibald's just sitting there with the liquor. And he's about to cry, like he has tears in his eyes. So basically saying the idea that nature Nature is love. And what he says through him is just what God created. What God created for man. Like the idea that nature is, it is pure, it is encompassing, it is equal for everyone. Everyone is on this earth and it has been given to you equally. So it doesn't have any judgment. It's not the earth itself is not materialistic. It doesn't want for anything. It just gives you and it's there for you. So it does encompass love. So that all makes sense. But then Canute, with his tears in his eyes, he's saying the creation of God is so beautiful, but then why? And I was waiting for it. He's like, why? As he like laments, why is there no love in the hearts of men? And I was waiting for it until we got the stupid apple, the temptation, the Garden of Eden. Why is there no love for men? Canute laments, why is there no love in the hearts of men? I was waiting for the Garden of Eden reference. I was like, are they going to do it? And they did. They showed us the apple. Yep. The idea that men traded knowledge for losing that love. Mm-hmm. The way that they phrase it in this episode is so interesting. And Willibald says, they say the reason we turn into creatures like this is because our ancestors disobeyed God. And God, the imagery they show us on top of this. So Willibald talks about how Willibald basically brings up the concept that man sinned and disobeyed God. And as we see that text, we see like the men firing arrows into corpses that were already dead. Like, what was the point? They're already dead. Our ancestors and committed sin a long time ago. And we see them coveting, we see them angry, we see them kicking poor Thorgrim around, who's still like unconscious, like in a daze. We were expelled from paradise. God, that face, the face that Canute makes, that may be the thumbnail of Canute just like crying and looking so stoic. Oh, we were expelled from paradise for our sins. And then it cuts to Thorkell, who kicks up the snow with the axe and then just boots Thorfinn like Team Rocket's blasting off again. There he goes. And everybody's like, where'd he go? And Askeladd's like, oh my God, no. And they're like, what's that? And he's like, oh, he dampened the shock with his legs. Nice move. Oh. And then poor Thorfinn, oh my God. His expressions. Thorfinn's had some great expressions this episode. And he just like flies out there. Oh. And crashes to the branches. Yeah, that's not good. Nope. And Thorkell's like, well, damn. And they say he must be dead. And Askeladd's like, oh my God, not good. He's like, not good. Damn it. I don't think Thorfinn's dead. And Askeladd says, I've lost all hope now. So Askeladd has supposedly, find the right marker, he feels like he's lost hope. Well, if Canute goes to talk to Thorkell, maybe Askeladd's hope will be restored through Canute. Because he's been waiting on Canute to wake up this whole time, so maybe that'll happen. He's like, I've lost all hope. And then we get the 18 minutes in, we get the halfway mid-credits. I'm like, oh my God. And everybody's just strung about by Bjorn. And Bjorn like punching that guy's face into the tree. God. And just holding that man's like face by the jaw. Ugh. Not good. Not good, Cotton. But he's got that cleaver in his back and that spear in his side, and he's still high on the mushroom. And then he sees Canute and Willibald. Oh my God. And they're still having this existential crisis. And Willibald's like, it seems like the battle's over. And so Willibald says that man sinned and disobeyed God and was expelled from paradise. He's like, we were expelled from paradise because we committed a sin. We disobeyed God, and thus we were punished. And Willibald says, but this is no good. That man has gone insane. He says, Your Highness, you better run away. And I like that Canute looks to him, like when he says this, like, run away. Like, what's the point? He's like, sane. I love that. He says, is there anyone sane in this world? That shot of Canute from beneath him is so good. Where he's like, is anybody sane in this world? You just said we were all expelled from paradise. And Willibald's like, what? Wait, what? He says, everyone is the same. I love it. I love that Canute is like, no. He's like, if we have all been expelled, we are all the same. He's like, there's no one insane. He's like, we're all in the same boat. We've all committed this sin, and so thus we've been punished. He's like, everyone is the same. And he's like, no one knows how to love. And no one knows the meaning of life. So he says, no one knows love, the meaning of life. It's like nobody knows their purpose of why we're here. Nobody knows how to love one another. No one knows the meaning of death. No one knows about this idea of death perfecting us and us being true warriors. No one even knows the reason that they're fighting or why we fight. They're just fighting aimlessly. Yes. Yep. That's Canute's just spouting off here, popping off. And Willibald's like, oh, Your Highness. And I love that his robe is like all around him. It's great. And he stands up like on top of the snow. And I love that he says, I'm sick of it. It's like, I've had enough. Done. Dunsies. And those eyes, God, those eyes, they're so good. And him looking up. And then Bjorn just being above him. And he's like, I'm tired of running. He's like, no. Mm-mm. He says, what we lost in exchange for wisdom. So I love this, that we traded knowledge. We traded knowledge and wisdom, and there's the apple getting bitten. What we lost, the most important thing. So, the most important thing. Which is that love, right? The most important thing that we have, that purity, we'll never get back as long as we live. We can never, I love this, we can never get back as long as we're alive. So yeah, so Canute is basically saying that no, this concept of this purity and this love, he's like, humans will never be capable of that. We're always going to be discriminating. We're always going to choose one thing over another. This entire series has been characters choosing one thing over another, not being equal. That whole concept of that idealistic peace, everybody in the comments has been saying it. They're like, well, that's not realistic. And I'm like, no, because it's not possible for humanity. Humanity is always going to be discriminating. It's always going to choose one thing over the other. And if they do get to the point where they love, and it says, while you'll never get that back while you're alive. That's the whole point of this, that the people that find that idealism, that concept, that true warrior that Thor's got, he got to it, and then what happened? He died. He couldn't hold on to it while he was alive. So it's like, once you figure that all out, you die. It's like he's like, as long as humanity is alive, they're going to keep fighting each other, which is a concept that's in some other series I've watched. The idea that as long as humanity exists, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be discrimination, there is going to be bias, you can only find a way, and he gets to the point of it, like, fine, if we cannot he's like, we've screwed up. We've traded knowledge for that important thing called love, and we can't get it back while we're alive. So what do we do then? Do we just sit here? No. So I love that he says, and Willibald's like, just like, what are we going to do? He says, we'll never attain it. Yet, even then, you still tell us to seek it. So he's like, fine. He's like, even though, he's like, basically, I like, he's like, God asks you to seek what you cannot get. He says, you still tell us to seek it. I do like that picture. There's so many good pictures of Canute in this episode. So many good Canutes. And he's like, Father in heaven. Oh, and that face. Oh, that face. Where he's like, you still tell us to seek it, Father in heaven. The thing that we can't have. And this kind of goes back to Anne, where she was like, why are these people not getting punished? It's like, well, because they've already been punished. Everybody's already been punished. You're not going to get it. And so Canute just gets mad. And Bjorn's like, what's this? And I love that Canute reaches out to him and like comes forward, and he's got like the resolve, and Bjorn's like, I don't know what to do with this. So he stands back. And this whole time he's like, you miserable warrior, you're the farthest from love. Yeah, he's like, you are the farthest from love. You just steal, and you're brutal, and you don't understand why you're doing it, and you don't have any compassion towards anyone else but yourself. He's like, you are the farthest from it. You who have been expelled from paradise. Oh. And then he reaches out to him. Isn't there any way to end the suffering from your punishment other than death? So yeah, he kind of says, he's like, is death the only answer? What do we do if it's not? Is there any way to help your suffering otherwise? And he's like, are you saying that we only exist so we may be tested and endure? No, and that's the thing that he gets at. He's like, we are not here to just be tested and endure. We're here to live, not just to survive. Right? Oh, I love this. I love his face. And he's like, Father in heaven, this man's soul cannot be saved through the trials that you set for him. Like the trials you set are not going to save him. He's not going to be able to pass the test. I love that. I love when he grabs him and brings Bjorn back to reality. God, it's so good. I love that image too. This thumbnail is going to be really hard to decide on. I love it. And Willibald's just like, I've seen a miracle. Like he's channeling it, and drops the liquor. He sees it. And I love that Canute puts his hand over Bjorn's that has the blood on it. Like calm down. And he grabs him and hugs him. Like, oh my God, I freaking love it that he grabs and hugs him. And he's thinking to himself this whole time, he's like, Father, I no longer seek your salvation. If you will no longer give us salvation, then with our own hands on this earth, we'll create our own paradise. So he's saying, I'm not seeking salvation, but I'll create our own paradise. Ooh. And there's some to that, because that there's been like the whole thing with Anne's family back in episode 14. There's a statement with that the family was just putting on airs. The family was just putting on airs and saying like, oh, well, we'll just turn to God to help us, but we're not going to do any of the work ourselves. We're just going to leave it all to God and not do any of the work ourselves. Because they were still pretty rotten. They were still talking awful about other people, and they weren't really practicing what they were preaching. They were just kind of like all talk and no action. And what Canute is saying is he's like, we can't just sit around on this earth and just expect to just sit here and do nothing and be sitting ducks. He's like, that's not going to work. We have to do, our actions have to speak louder than our words. Like, we can sit here and pray all we want, but if we don't do anything for ourselves acting wise, then there's no point. It's doing nothing. So he's like, I'm sick of just sitting here and asking God to do everything for me. that's not going to work. And he's like, God's made it clear that humanity goofed, so we have no chance of getting like this unless it's not just going to come to us, right? And so I like the idea that Canute is saying, no, I'm not going to sit around and just sit here and do nothing and expect God to just throw me a bone, because that's not going to happen. He's like, if we're going to have a paradise, we have to create it for ourselves. That he's like, we've got to take action. The time for just sitting around doing nothing's over. And that reaches Bjorn. And I think that there is some truth to that. It's like, regardless of your religious beliefs, you can't just say something and not act on it, right? You can't just say, oh, I believe this, but your actions don't reflect that at all, right? And so Canute, like, embracing Bjorn and giving him comfort is acting on those beliefs. He's like, I'm sick of just sitting here waiting for something to happen and not doing anything myself to actually make it come to fruition. So he's like, no, that's stupid. I'm going to actually put what I preach into practice, and maybe it will make a difference. And then he just gets all serious, and I'm like, Canute, okay, I'm here for it. I'm here for this, Canute. And Willibald's like, holy shit. And the one guy, what's his face? Alki, or whatever, he's like, gets Bjorn with the knife. He comes in all banana fish style, and he's like, stop, you fools. Don't fight feudal battles anymore. He's like, this is stupid. He's like, you guys are, he's like, we're on the same side. He's like, you're both Danes. Why are you fighting each other? This is dumb. Kind of like Canute's like over it. He's like, your wounds are deep. Are you okay? And Bjorn's like, I slipped up. Damn it. And he's like, don't move. Your stomach's cut. And he asks Willibald, he's like, you got the alcohol. Bring it over here and sterilize this shit. Let's go. He's like, treat his wounds. And Willibald's like, did I go to nursing school? I don't think so. He's like, I'm going to go catch the horses. Canute's like, you help him. He's like, Your Highness, I've seen a miracle. And Canute's like, be quiet and treat his wounds. And he's like, but Prince, what are you doing? Where are you going? Like, we're supposed to take you to Thorkell. And he's like, oh, I'm going to Thorkell. We're going to have this. He's like, I'm planning to see Thorkell. It's great. He's like, we won't be able to transport the wounded unless we borrow their sleds. He's like, we can't transport these wounded people without it. So yeah, we gotta go talk to Thorkell. I'm amazed. And Bjorn's like, you're talking nonsense. Bjorn's like, we gotta get you away. He's like, do you have any idea why I'm in the mess like this right now, you idiot? If you get captured by Thorkell, there'll be no meaning to any of this. And Canute just looks at him like, really? He's like, meaning? Did you say meaning? He's like, the meaning of your battles? I'm like, Canute's like, Askeladd's gonna leave you. Yeah. I love this. He's like, there is no meaning to a battle like this. God, I love Canute. I freaking love him in this episode. It's so good. And they're both just like, what? Canute's like, so don't die. Quit being stupid. Warriors become my vassals. I'll teach you about when you must fight and against whom. I'm like, dude, okay. All right, Canute. I'll give meaning to your battles, to your life and death. As he like, L'Oreal swishes that hair back. Oh my God, yes. Oh my God. And then, yeah, that's what... the kingly flap of that sleeve with the vibrations is the duty of a king is. Oh my God. Yes, please. Oh my God. I freaking love it. I love it. It's so good. I'm head over heels for our boy Canute. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. Me and Whiteboard could have had a lot of fun with this episode. So yeah, Canute's like, that's it. Done. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. So I think that Askeladd, this might be what Askeladd's been wanting to see this whole time. So Askeladd might be pleased as punch when he sees Canute. Now, the thing that might throw a wrench into Askeladd's plans is I still think that there is a part of Askeladd that believes he can control Canute. And Canute may be exactly what he wants now, but the fact that Askeladd will not be able to control Canute is going to be interesting. But I'm going to be curious to see how Askeladd spins this. How will Askeladd spin this to his favor? That's what I'm curious about. Like, how is Askeladd going to get this to spin to his favor? That is the question. Thorfinn, hopefully he's alive. I think he's broken some ribs at least. The branches might have broke his fall, but I think he's at least broken some limbs, especially falling from that high. Willibald's like, I guess I'll use my alcohol canteen my barrel to treat Bjorn's wounds and help him out. And then, yeah, Thorkell, I'm curious to see how Thorkell deals with all this, where this is going. What? This could all blow up. Canute's got a great presence now, but I don't know if this is all going to blow up in his face. And Thorkell's going to be like, yoink, nope, bye, or I don't know. But I'm all here for Canute's awakening. I'm all here for it. And to see where this goes. I'm all here for it. I'm so excited. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to wait to watch episode 19. But it'll probably at least be after the comments for the next episode that's coming out tomorrow on YouTube. And then if I get any more comments with episode 17 on Patreon, to get those in line. But yeah. Oh my gosh. Mwah. Probably my favorite episode. One of my favorite episodes so far. There are a couple episodes with Askeladd I really like, but this one's definitely in the top 5. This one's in the top 5 so far. I like this episode quite a bit. So yeah. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, but I'm excited to see what happens next. I hope you all are too. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Vinland Saga.